And hello again from WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. My name's Josh Manning. I am Deputy Managing Editor for assignment at the Western Journal. Joining me, Andrew Shasha, Senior Reporter, Head of Features. He got a new title recently at the Western Journal. And on my left, Michael Austin, reporter for the Western Journal. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have got a lot to cover. We're talking gas prices, we're talking about Biden's first presser, and we're talking about Biden's just bizarrely slurred speech, which continues to go. We've got a couple of clips of that. Before we get to that, though, we want to thank our sponsor, PatriotDepot.com. Patriot Depot is where conservatives gear up for the conservative revolution. If you use if at checkout you use the code WJLive, you will get 20% off your entire purchase. That 20% off is store-wide. So stock up, use the coupon code WJLive that you got here, and you'll get 20% off your entire purchase at PatriotDepot.com. Thank you guys for sponsoring us. We appreciate it. Okay, lots going on today, and most of it having to do with President Biden. I'm going to kick it to Andrew first. Andrew, we were talking about topics ahead of time. You've actually got multiple things. You're talking about the border. You're talking about lack of transparency. You're talking about the first presser. And you're talking about whether or not Biden is just that different from Trump on some things that the media really criticized Trump over. Take it away.
Absolutely no. So I think over the last month or so, I guess almost 2 months now since Biden took office, we've seen just how much of a chameleon he really was on the campaign trail. We've seen on Tuesday, the White House finally, after I think it's going to be in the 60-day mark, or maybe high 50s, don't quote me on that, days without a solo press conference from the President of the United States. Finally, on Tuesday, it was announced that there would be a briefing at the end of March that Biden would lead, and he would be, the solo figure at this press briefing. It is the first one of the administration, and having heard the promise for a year straight that this was going to be the most transparent administration, right, that this was going to be a far cry from Trump, who is always assaulting the establishment press, who is assaulting press freedoms and assaulting the First Amendment. This administration was going to be different. Another issue that we heard this administration was going to be different on was, of course, the border. We heard that we were going to see a return to humane policy at the southern border. No more kids in cages. We were going to see transparency on that front as well. And of course, we have not seen that. In this first 2 months, we have seen Joe Biden essentially reopen a child detainment facility on the southern border. We have seen that he has not loosened COVID restrictions to allow the press into his detention facilities, and lawyers for unaccompanied minors in those facilities are now reporting out to the press that some of these children are being held and detained for much longer than the 72-hour detention period that they are allowed before they have to be given over to refugee resettlement. Some hundreds of hours in the low hundreds. Without showers, without proper nourishment, just an absolute nightmare. And of course, the press is not welcome. So with all of this, we have seen that Biden refuses to refer to this issue as a crisis. He refuses to kind of address it properly in the media. And at the Western Journal, we have not only covered his unwillingness to hold a press conference, we have also covered the fact that he will not be attending the border amid the ongoing crisis because it's not a crisis to this administration. And so what we're seeing is that on many grounds, of course, we've talked about this on and on. Joe Biden is very different from Trump. No question about it. The man has shifted pretty far left for Democrats in terms of some pretty major policy goals. But when it comes to executive authority, abuses of that authority, lack of transparency, and just poor handling of the political landscape and the political game, Biden is par for the course with Trump. No transparency, and the border crisis that they claimed Trump had, the poor treatment, the inhumane treatment.
But Trump was more transparent.
Yes,
it's not just it's opposite.
Yes,
way more transparent. Border apprehensions plummeted. border detainment plummeted because these folks knew if we cross, we're just going to get booted back over. And we stopped the crossings, too, by making people who were applying for asylum stay in Mexico.
Not to mention that Trump was the most transparent president when it came to those press briefings we were just talking about. And so some of the progressive figures in the coalition who were never really on board with Biden to begin with have started to come out against that. We've seen Ilhan Omar, we've seen AOC. Some of these folks kind of speak out very briefly on Twitter. Nothing major, but they have spoken out about it. And so I wanted to ask you guys is, are we going to see and are we seeing a substantial number of leftists essentially wake up to the fact that they were tricked by the Biden campaign?
I think it's less of that and more of the fact that they need to appear to be like ethically consistent. So
That's interesting. That's interesting because that doesn't always happen. You know, there's a great video of Dick Durbin from a couple of years ago talking about how, if we do away with the filibuster, it'll destroy the Senate. And now he's talking, you have to do away with the filibuster. You think this is an issue of intellectual consistency?
Yeah, I mean, I think they push so hard on the rhetoric that Trump's dealings at the border, that ICE, that Border Patrol, that they are essentially just Nazis herding in, Jews into concentration camps. That's what they've been saying this whole time. And now all of these reports are coming out basically saying, there's kids that aren't getting enough food in the facilities now because they can't handle the influx. And it's pretty clear things are worse for those kids now than they were a year ago. And so,
I wonder if there's another piece to this, and that is that people like Ilhan Omar and others, they won't be satisfied until the border really is just completely porous.
Of course, yeah.
So I wonder if it's less like a cynical determination to be intellectually consistent, and more just, hey, you're not giving us as porous a border as we want. Really, we want them to just be able to come over, hop on a plane that we subsidize, and land in any city.
I think we could attribute this to more radicalization kind of on the fringes of the party because
agreed.
These are the same people that are saying that Obama was too moderate back in his day. So that's definitely a big factor in this too.
And so is this mess that is essentially going to kind of coalesce around these major problems that the administration is facing early on? I mean, what you're talking about, Josh, with kind of the flipped script in the media in terms of Trump and Biden, it's almost like an April Fool's joke that we're getting from this administration at the outset. But are we going to see essentially that this is going to kind of develop into a full-scale, ideological conflict within the party that results in some problems in the swing states in 2022? Or do you think that they'll actually be able to get it together on the left and kind of see the unity that Biden is talking about? They did a decent job of that on the campaign trail. Can they hold it together?
I don't know. I'm not positive what a coalesced, held together Democrat Party looks like. I'm not sure what equilibrium looks like over there. I don't know the answer to that question. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Yeah, that doesn't. What do you think, Andrew?
I don't. I have to feel like it's got to be something of. We talked about last week in one of your segments, Michael, about cancel culture, about how that kind of is it meeting its maximum capacity? Are we hitting a point where essentially the center starts to shift and the top falls over? And I have to say that must be what we're seeing. I think that the ties that bind in the Democratic Party over the course of the last election cycle were very thin. Biden had to, contort himself to fit through every box and be everything to everyone for a full year to make sure that he got all the votes he needed in every state with every Democratic constituency to make it happen against Trump, and he almost didn't. Sure, the popular vote, whatever. We don't talk about the popular vote. It doesn't matter. So when it comes to the actual totals in the Electoral College, it wasn't so great for Biden, and I don't know if those ties are going to hold together much longer.
Well, I'm not positive when the Democrat Party has ever significantly shifted back toward the middle. If they shift, they creep toward the left, and maybe it's a question of how quickly they creep. When something happens that looks kind of like that, normally I think it's when they've suffered a pretty big defeat and they realize, okay, we
Yes.
got to go undercover again for a little bit. But the leftism always comes back out, and it always shifts farther to the left.
And we saw that right after the election when Democrats actually lost some ground and they didn't win as many seats as they thought they would. And then you had, that leaked phone call that came out.
I was just thinking that.
Of moderate Dems just attacking.
We're getting killed out here, guys. We've got to stop talking about defunding.
Shut up about the socialism. And then the socialists going, well, you're just racist. So
Yeah. And as boomers now age out, eventually, as they're essentially begin dying, the influence that is trying to keep the Democrats anchored at least somewhere toward halfway moderate positions is dying out too. Gen Xers are not as conservative as boomers, and millennials not as conservative as Gen Xers. So, I think the drift will continue. I don't know. Over 4 years, who knows what will happen? Nobody knows what will happen. I tend to think Biden will not serve out his full term. We'll show you video here in a minute of some more slurring, and you can make that decision for yourself. Kamala Harris then takes over, and I think a new iteration of the Democrat Party will be born that will be significantly farther left. Because Biden, you can always act like you're more left. For Democrats, it's very hard to act like you're more conservative.
Yes, it is.
The only reason Joe Manchin survives is because of where he's from. But Kamala's not going to have that problem. So I think the embrace of whatever the next iteration of leftism is will definitely happen there.
Absolutely.
You have any other thoughts on any of that?
Absolutely not. Let's see how it is that Biden's going to let it all go.
So speaking of transitioning to Kamala before all is said and done, President Biden, while he refuses to hold a press conference, he did sit down with ABC's George Stephanopoulos for an interview, and there's a clip of that interview that began floating around, I think, last night. We've got it right now. It's getting pretty good traffic on westernjournal.com. We have been unable to determine what Biden is saying. We had one editor in the newsroom who thought she had figured it out. It's not clear to me that she did figure it out. We're going to roll that video, and then I'm going to ask you guys what you think about it. We'll talk about it a little bit more. Let's roll the video.
But how about right now? You've said you want the investigation to continue. You saw Chuck Schumer, Senator Gillibrand, majority of the congressional delegation don't think he can be an effective governor right now. Can he serve effectively?
Well, that's a judgment for them to make about their state where they can be effective. Here's my position.
I don't know. If you think you know what he said, please post it in the comments. We're very curious about it. We do have an editor who thought she had figured it out. Run it, Logan, run it one more time.
But how about right now? You've said you want the investigation to continue. You saw Chuck Schumer, Senator Gillibrand, majority of the congressional delegation don't think he can be an effective governor right now. Can he serve effectively?
Well, that's a judgment for them to make about their state where they can be effective. Here's my position.
Something about the state they can be effective, maybe. I'm not sure. And I can't figure out what happened to his jaw. The jaw jerks off to one side. Like, I mean, my first thought was, good gracious, did he have a stroke? I don't think he did.
Right.
I mean,
But
the man
I
must
don't
be
know what
wearing
that looked
dentures.
like.
He must be wearing dentures from some of the slips we have seen.
That's a lot. What a lot of people have said. A whole lot of people have said. But I can't figure out exactly what he said. What's interesting is it doesn't look like ABC could figure out what he said either, because on their website where they transcribed the interview, this is what they posted. Or maybe not. I thought we had a graphic for that. Apparently we don't. What happened is they actually edited out the entire flub. So they go through,
In the transcript.
In the transcript. So they asked, Stephanopoulos asks the question. You get part of Biden's response. Then you have a dash, which is where whatever the gibberish was. And then they pick up on the other side of the gibberish.
They've
What
just
you
given up.
should do, they have just given up. What you should do is actually put in an ellipsis,
Yes.
dot. That indicates that there's missing text.
Yes.
That's not what a dash indicates. A dash indicates the beginning of a new clause. or can indicate that. So ABC, whether it was just they couldn't understand it and gave up, like you suggested, or they didn't want to admit it had happened in print, they essentially scrubbed it out of the interview. So right before we went on the air, I got a Google News alert that Russia had withdrawn their ambassador based on what Biden said earlier about having looked into Putin's eyes and what was it? Said that he has no soul. Did he say he told Putin he has no soul? He told Putin he has no soul. Now, I think we were talking about this in the newsroom earlier. I think this is a riff on George Bush's statement, 15 or 20 years ago, when he said, I looked into his eyes and saw his soul. Right. So I think what Biden is doing is actually riffing off of that. But anyway, Russia has withdrawn its ambassador in the wake of that. And I can't help but think that's what Putin's facing down. Yeah. And I know we've said it here before. I've said it to you guys before. We got the Cuban Missile Crisis because JFK met with Khrushchev. He was high on painkillers at the time. He had horrible back trouble. He was incoherent. Khrushchev looked at him and thought he was a complete pansy.
Weak.
Very weak, and said, okay, well, let's try to bluff him and see what happens. That's where the Cuban Missile Crisis came from. And now I picture Putin. This guy's a stone cold, presumably KGB killer.
Yes.
He's almost certainly had other people killed while perhaps not even as a KGB agent, but otherwise, facing down Dentures Biden. This can't be good for United States grand strategy. It can't be good for U.S. national security. It can't be good for the West versus the East. Any thoughts?
I mean, first of all, the man is full of it. Outside of the flubs and the gaffes, Joe Biden is beyond full of it. It's back to that first segment. I mean, we saw throughout the campaign trail that we heard, this is a man who's going to go on the world stage. He's going to represent America well. He's going to build great partnerships, and he's going to stand down our enemies. And so he can talk all the game he wants. But when this is what you're seeing in a pre-recorded, event with the media, you have
sitting down. It's low pressure.
You have absolutely no faith in what he's going to do on the world stage.
It's a Clinton staffer he's interviewing with.
And you almost have to, save for when it might be dangerous for national security, like what you're talking about, Josh, you almost have to think that it's better for Joe Biden that he's doing these things, because if editorial was correct and the statement was something to the to the tune of, well, it's up to them, up to the New York delegation to decide if Cuomo is effective. That is a deeply politically cynical decision and statement, right? Is to say, well, throw everything that I've said about sexual harassment to the wind.
That's good.
If Cuomo is still effective, we keep him in office and we don't eat our own. Because he's trying to, again, hold together the wings of the party. So you have to wonder if it's almost better that he's just a bumbling fool that's absolutely full of it.
What worries me about this whole situation is not
about the bumbling fool.
What worries me about all of this is not necessarily that Biden will collapse under pressure or he won't be able to deal with certain things. What worries me is that there's a select team around him that's making all those decisions, people that were not elected to be president of the United States that are making all of those decisions for the American people.
Yes.
That was the criticism of Reagan in his second term.
And to some degree, on it, completely merited argument.
Yeah, 100%. And Reagan's, the way he governed was he had some broad ideals that he pushed and made sure the people around him took care of it. So his style of governing lent itself to that. But you're exactly right. There are a bunch of unelected people who are advising the president, but really you wonder how much advising they're doing and how much governing they're doing.
And, and take that to Kamala Harris, who, sure, she was on the ticket, but there is no way she would have been, I don't believe she would have been elected president.
No, what,
so nobody
2%?
Yeah.
Wasn't it 2%, I think, that she ended up getting in the primary? I mean, it was horrible. I don't know that she ever broke above that.
No.
No.
Yeah, so what are we left with Biden? And the alarming thing is nobody knows. I mean, presumably the guys who are close to him, who are making those decisions, or whoever the guy is with the remote control that controls Biden's mouth, those guys know, but essentially no one else does. That's disconcerting to me as an American, as a taxpayer, and as a voter. Imagine what that looks like to anybody in Russia. Yes. Imagine what that looks like to I almost said the NKVD, the FSB. Look at
the MIB.
Sorry, I'm talking about Khrushchev and stuff. I'm time shifting here. Yeah, so you have a weakness invites aggression.
Yes.
Strength is a deterrent to aggression, right? But weakness is provocative. And provocative is the right word for that. Max Boot said that as wrong as Max is about lots of stuff. He said that years ago, and it's true. Weakness is provocative. It provokes aggressive action. Biden is clearly weak. That is provocative, and there are several groups out there that would be interested in exploiting that to the detriment of the United States.
Well, in all fairness, any Democrat would be weak in terms of foreign policy, so it's not that much of a difference.
We saw this with Iran, 4 years ago.
Yeah, just send them some cash. That'll help. Yeah,
yeah, and I mean, that is truly remarkable in the span of a career, in the span of Joe Biden's career, how radically everything has shifted. The Democrats, infiltrated by the Soviets as they were back in the 40s and 50s and going past that, there were still plenty of Democrats who understood the existential nature of the West versus the rest and what U.S. grand strategy was. And compare those people to people like Ilhan Omar or AOC. I mean, these just gibbering idiots. Which is not a very charitable representation of them, but that I'm not positive how else to describe them based on their actions.
It speaks
Last
so
thing.
much to the dissent of the party. I mean, the only time Joe Biden has ever been tough was in the Senate when he was playing bully with people like Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas, when he had the opportunity to sit at the front of panels and pick on whoever he got to question. This is a person who...
when he got to play beat up on the black guy, which is what he was doing with Clarence Thomas.
But of course, over time, you've just seen a complete dissent, and it speaks to, for all complaints about what Biden said on the campaign trail, the idea that American influence is dissipating on the international stage, and this speaks to kind of that is also provocative. This certainly doesn't help the case that, America has dissipated on the world stage.
Yeah, Shapiro wrote a good piece. The Western Journal, I think we'll have it out today. I know I helped edit part of it earlier today. Shapiro wrote a very good piece talking about wokeness taking over in the Pentagon and how we're more concerned about maternity wear uniforms than we are the ability to kill things and break things. And again, weakness is provocative. And we are increasingly sacrificing lethality for a woke culture. Something to keep an eye on. All right, so from talk about Biden and his pressers in the border to talk about Biden's flubs, now let's talk about gas prices.
Yeah.
And whether or not Biden is responsible for this, and more alarmingly, what Biden might be responsible for going forward. What do you have, Michael?
So gas prices skyrocketing across the country. It's gone up an average of 30% nationwide, with some states having gas prices that are exceeding the $3 mark.
It was $45 to fill up my charger this morning. $45, and I'm fairly sure my wife did not put premium in, which she should have. But anyway.
And now a lot of people are quick to just say, oh yeah, this is all Biden's fault. And OPEC came out and they said, look, there's increasing demand for gas, which makes sense. We're coming out of lockdowns, more people are moving around. Yeah. And they haven't increased their supply yet. And so that's why we're seeing what we're seeing now. However, it's causing a lot of people to question, okay, Joe Biden, what are you going to do about this? If gas prices continue to rise, how are you going to handle it? How the Democrats who are in power of the government right now, how are you guys going to deal with this? And essentially, what one expert told the Washington Times was, well, they're actually probably really happy that gas prices are going up, and a lot of their policies
Bingo.
going forward will probably be tailored towards keeping those prices high because they want to discourage people from using gas.
It's a sin tax.
Yes.
If you haven't heard
Yes.
that term before, it's a term
Tobacco.
that's used generally for tobacco and alcohol. And they call them sin taxes because those were things that were viewed as sin, back when we had morals. And those taxes were used to try to discourage use. And so you can essentially, I mean, it makes sense because using fossil fuels is
and they
sinful
want
to
to,
them.
and they're gonna. There's all kinds of talks of them imposing taxes and all kinds of other things in order to move people towards more renewable energies, energies that won't be able to sustain us.
What is it? 4% of the energy grid right now, I think,
Yes.
comes from renewable, and we're spending $100 billion a year
it's
on
dismal.
But what is becoming very clear right now is that having high gas prices is not, people don't like that. That is unpopular. And yet, it seems like Democrats going forward, Biden especially among them, since he's our president, they want to lean into this. They want to keep gas prices high. And what I found funny about this, I was going to ask you guys, who do you think this hurts the most? And for me, when I think about, gas prices going up and minimum wage laws going up, the groups who often get hurt the most are minorities. And, black folks that are just trying to get by, they're just trying to make their way through the market. They're trying to, increase their overall equity in terms of the group itself and actually, achieve equality in terms of economic mobility. And this is just one more thing that's going to affect them more, hurt them more, keep them down more than it does whites or Asians or all these other groups. And so,
But that's why we need reparations, Michael.
exactly.
You see that the rising price of gas is just another reason for another left-wing policy to solve the problem that the left created.
That's a very Randian take on it, is that the government creates a problem, then the government has to find a solution for it, which creates another problem and exacerbates the first problem. So you need another regulation. Yeah, I was thinking about this question actually from the flip side yesterday. The people who don't feel this, people who walk.
Yes.
A lot of people in cities walk or take public transportation. They
Most
don't
of
feel
my
it
life.
as badly. People like you, wretches like you, and people who have drivers.
Yeah.
And
elite.
that's a lot of people in D.C. who walk, take public transportation, or have drivers. People who farm.
Oh, man.
People imagine what's going to happen to farm. If you just watch diesel prices, it's unbelievable and how much how much fuel that consumes. And then rice wells, those run,
Right.
a lot of those are run off of generators, and those cost money. The price of absolutely everything goes up. But yeah, the people who are hit hardest are the people who can least afford it, and the people who tend to live in the center of the country.
Rural areas, for sure. And it is obvious. So right now, we can't necessarily put the blame squarely on the Democrats' shoulders. But going forward, we most certainly will be able to if they achieve a lot of things they want to. And this is a winning issue for us. There is no doubt about it. If it comes to the point where it is Democrats responsible for keeping gas prices high, for increasing gas prices even higher, do you think they'll get pressured into backing off a lot of those green policies that they're seeking to push on the rest of us?
Well, that's related to the equilibrium question Andrew was asking. Where is the Democrat Party? It is balanced right now?
Right.
And I don't know the answer to that. I don't think they will. I think there's enough guys. If they were going to get smart about this, the Green New Deal those words would never have been uttered again after the memo leaked.
True.
But it leaked, and they're still using it. To me, that argues that, hey, they have no problem with prices going up, and they're willing to double down on it.
I think the positive kind of aspect of that, though, is that it is something that undoubtedly, in my opinion, would kill Democrat hopes
Yes.
in 2022 and 2024. I remember, and Michael, I'm sure you remember, Josh, maybe not so much, you were an adult at this time. I remember growing up after 9/11, I lived with my grandparents and my mother, and I remember my mom and my grandfather coming home every single day. What was the price of gas? I remember hearing that conversation from every adult that I grew up near. Gas prices post 9/11 and with the Iraq War was a huge question, and it was crisis level, and it was something that was agitating just about everybody. I think it's the same way, and I think it ends up being a situation where a lot of these kind of crises that are out of the hands of a political figure and whether they did exacerbate it or not, can be viewed as having been exacerbated by that figure, crush presidential dreams or kind of hopes for a party or a figure.
Yeah.
Donald Trump saw this last year, a figure that very well with the first 3 years of the administration should have walked on for another term, got killed by a pandemic that destroyed the most successful economy in decades. And so I think that, rising gas prices, particularly if exacerbated by green policy, will kill the Democrats going forward.
When I started driving, I remember gas prices being at 79 cents a gallon.
Oh my gosh, you're so old.
I remember that. And I remember at about 5 p.m. on September 11th, 2001, I remember folks at the gas station in our little town. We were in a tiny town in Arkansas, folks lining up to get gas because we didn't know what was going to happen. I think you're right about it. One of the sad things in this is that we had complete energy independence. So essentially nothing should have happened to prices. Nothing at all should have happened to prices because we know where the prices were before COVID hit. So gas prices should just rebound to that level.
Yeah.
But since we've decided to hook into the international market, that international demand has an impact on it. Which is, just truly ridiculous. Anyway, any other thoughts on gas before we...
The one thing I'll say, and I'm hoping to maybe convince you that Democrats will back off of this if it ends up being politically inconvenient, is that, sure, there are plenty of Democrats that have all these principles about, green energy and all of the other social justice causes they stand by. But there is nothing they value more than power. And if something causes them to start to lose power, they're going to back off that.
So I hope that's right. And I was thinking about this a second ago. During Bill Clinton's first term, they passed a new tax on car registrations. So when you went and you registered your car for the year, you paid a new tax. And Clinton attributed his loss. He was governor of Arkansas, lost, then came back. He attributed that loss to voters every single month going to the DMV, and a 12th of the voters getting ticked off yet again because Clinton had stuck it to them. But he wasn't smart enough to fix it. And maybe there's a legislative component in there too. I'm not positive if you would have to have had the legislature revoke that or not. I would think he could have simply told the DMV not to collect the tax. Right. But he wasn't smart enough, and that was early on in Clinton's career. But gosh, talk about a smart political operator. I hope you're right, and basic economics would dictate that you're right. They'll do what's in their interest.
Right.
But I'm not sure can they see. I think there are times when they can't see that their interests don't align with their agenda.
And the media complicates it, with a wealth. I mean, the idea that they have so much control over the messaging apparatus in this country just kind of complicates that. I'd like to think that hopefully it will cause some damage. I'm with you, Michael, but the media does complicate it. Gas prices are part of what tripped 2008. Yep. The subprime crisis was what was really there, but gas prices hitting $4 a gallon. I mean, I remember our talking about how how truly unsustainable that was, and sure enough, it was unsustainable. Anyway, with that, thank you all for joining us on WJ Live today. We're so grateful that you tune in every day. We are here every day, Monday through Friday, at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific.
Be sure to check out our sponsor, Patriot Depot. Again, if you go to patriotdepot.com, use the code WJLive, you'll get 20% off your entire order. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to click the subscribe button. After you've clicked that, you'll have the option to click a little bell. That bell is going to make sure you get notified every time we go live, so you won't miss an episode. Thank you so much for joining us. For Andrew, for Michael, I'm Josh Manning with the Western Journal. We're going to see you tomorrow. Thanks.
Josh, did you hear? They're putting the Libertarian back on the podcast.
No.
Oh? You didn't see the calendar?
No.
You should talk to Kayla about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, who's on the show Tuesday?
You and Joe.
Yeah. Like he's back.
Yeah, no, you and Joe. You
The
should
Libertarian?
Yeah, Libertarian Joe.
He's not back.
You should just go in the studio and check it out.
You're messing with me.
Okay.
Okay. Nice joke, Kayla. Come here to go to the studio. No!